Seeing myself. There we are. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Sheer Chat After Dark. Mm. My name is Dr. Rashawn Brugnax, and I'm so excited to be here. And this topic tonight is one that I have presented before, not on this platform, but on another. And it was just as exciting. And so I thought, why not bring it back here? And so this will probably be a multi-segment topic. It's called Making Peace with Your Past. And I think it's a topic that is always pertinent. It's always something that people can draw from because I think so many of us walk around with various forms of hurt and what should we call it? Past trauma and things that have happened in our lives, and they create who the person we are, today. But sometimes we carry that stuff through our lives, and it really starts to affect us. So before we begin, I would like to say good evening to everybody who is on Instagram, and good evening to everyone who is on our live audience from Twitter and Facebook. So, like I said, this is called Making Peace with Your Past, and I subtitle it Making Peace with Your Past so that it does not show up in your present. So, like I was saying, many people, they deal with things, they have experienced things, and those things really coin and shape the person that they are today. Like we said, when we go from one relationship to another, we have to be careful not to bring our baggage, right? But that is kind of difficult. But what I always say is not so much that you just want to make sure that you don't bring your baggage. You don't want to bring the negative things. What I say you bring are your lessons. So, as you go through relationships or you go through various things in your life, you always should reflect on how or what you've learned from that particular situation, regardless of what it is. It could be a job, it could be a friendship, it could be a relationship, what have you. Whatever the situation is, you can reflect and say, what did I kind of learn from that? What do I want to draw from that to move forward and take with me into the next situation, whatever it may be? And what are those things that I want to leave behind? And so often, we have so much that goes on in those various situations. And what we end up with is a lot of guilt regarding the situation, right? And so with the guilt, the first thing that we have to do in making peace with our past is to forgive ourselves. So we can't sit and like torment ourselves now over whatever has taken place, if it's, like I said, the relationship or the job. So say you move from one job to the next and you kind of thought, oh my goodness, this is going to be such a great opportunity. And you get there and it really is not. And so you start kicking yourself and you're like, dang, I left behind, a great opportunity that I had somewhere else. I left behind friends. I left behind benefits. I left behind, just it could be like a certain point of advancement that you were going to. You left all that behind and you get to this new place and you say, dang, this is not what I thought. What you have to do first is forgive yourself. Acknowledge that that was a mistake or it was something that may not have been as well thought out, what have you. But you got to forgive yourself and not hold yourself trapped in torment over these situations, because the number one thing we're made to move through life. We're made to traverse through life, and we can't do that if we allow ourselves to stay in one place mentally, right? So the next thing, like I said before, my number two is take a lesson, think back and say, okay, what did I learn from that? Let's say if it was a relationship, what did I learn? What are the things that worked really well? What are the things that didn't work? Where did things start to go off track? Where were things really good? So as I move forward to my next relationship, what are the things that I've learned that I do want to take and draw and make sure that I deposit it into the new relationship? And what are those things that I want to definitely leave behind? I think that is so important to do, because again, if you don't take time to reflect, to kind of figure those things out, you just walk aimlessly and then you end up making the same mistakes again. Like the adage is, um, those who do not learn from history, you're doomed to repeat it. It's the same thing with situations in life. If you're at a job and you just kind of floated through and you made mistakes and say something, I don't want to say detrimental, but something happens and you end up losing the job, but you never take time to really reflect on why that happened, why you took that particular path, why these things took place. Then when you move on to the next job, you're like, you're still in the same mode. You haven't learned anything. You haven't moved and grabbed anything from that previous situation that you can take into your new situation. That's why I think, like, especially with jobs, it's always good to have that time in between. You go from one to the next. We always say, oh, I want to take a break, I'm leaving this job, I'm going to my next job, I'm going to have a weekend in between because I just want to relax, I don't want to do anything. But that's also the time to reflect and say, what are the things that I want to make sure that I do in my new position? What are the things that I want to make sure I kind of avoid? If you were that person who, you were a great employee, once you got there, things were always on point. You did what you were supposed to, but the issue was you had trouble getting there on time. When you move forward or you have that time to reflect, you want to say, okay, moving forward, I know that I'm supposed to be on time. I don't want to take that bad habit from one job to the next. So that's a lesson. If you say, hey, perhaps you got terminated because you were the leader of the gossip mill, and yes, it's easy to blame everybody else for your mistake. You can say, well, Susie, she told HR that I did it, so it's her fault. Or somebody told that we were having a conversation outside of work and they came back and told it, and so it's their fault. It's easy to point the fingers to everybody else. But again, the old adage is, when you point your finger at someone else, you have three pointing back at yourself. You have to look and see, what part did you play? So in that, the lesson is, hey, those bad habits, I don't want to take from one situation and bring them forward to the next. So the number 3 is that we have to forgive the other person. So now this is something that I find is definitely important, when you deal with other people, say, like, especially in relationships, right? Because in relationships, when they go up and down, or they have their ins and outs, ups and downs, unders, all that kind of stuff, it's easy to blame somebody else, but you also have to sit and look at yourself first, right? So that's, again, taking that lesson. You're looking at, what part did I have to play? But then when you forgive the other person, you say, you know what? You choose to forgive them, because forgiveness is not for the other person, it's for you. So a lot of times we don't want to forgive people, or we don't want to, give that leeway, because we think we're allowing them to get away with something. It is not. That forgiveness is so that you don't stay in that same place. Once you're able to forgive something, you're able to move forward. You become loose from that situation. That situation no longer holds power over you. And also that person no longer holds power over you. So it's very, very important to understand, how forgiveness really works, and how it can affect you when you don't forgive. I'll say I've had situations. I am a person that I always say I have to move in my own time. And while I understand forgiveness is very important, sometimes I have to work through some things in order to get to that point, right? You have to know yourself and to be able to do those things. If you don't know yourself, you will have such a hard time. One of the things I think is so important, that as people, we have to learn ourselves, because then we don't allow other people to place things on us, their expectation of action, their expectation of how we should operate. When you know yourself, you can tell someone, hey, this is how I operate. In relationships, friendships, working relationships, all that kind of stuff, family relationships. When you are able to say, this is how I operate, you let people know how you plan to move. When you can't say, this is how I operate, you're like a sail blowing in the wind. You're just flapping. you're all over the place, right? Because you are not grounded within yourself. You have no idea how you really operate. But once you do, you can let other people know that. And then that gives them or lets them know what to expect. So the number four, or I'll say, so number three, again, make sure that you are able to forgive the other person and you're able to move forward. Even in, it's, I think it's so important, like with bad relationships, right? Relationships that end in some type of art or, end in a negative way, that I think it's perfect to take your time. Number one, you forgive yourself in that situation, forgive the things that you may have done to make things go awry. Number two, you figure out what are your lessons that you learned from that situation. What are the things you are willing to do? Again, what are the things that you absolutely don't? What are your hard lines as it goes in terms of the relationship? Number three, forgive the other person so that you can be loosed from the situation yourself. You're able to put that behind you. That situation or person no longer holds the power over you. And number four, you stop feeling guilty. You stop beating yourself up. That goes back to the number one, forgive yourself. You have to stop feeling guilty. Feeling guilty allows you, or it keeps you in that one place. It keeps you trapped so that you're unable to move forward, right? Number five, I always say you have to take your time. That goes back to taking a lesson. A lot of these things are repetitive and they feed into one another, but take your time to really evaluate. One of the things that I love to do is sit back and think why certain things happened the way they did. I think that is so important because when you sit and you're able to really evaluate and say, how did I get from this point to this point? Then how did we get from this point to this point? And what happened in between? What were the catalysts between these various situations that caused certain things, that made us feel a certain way, that caused us to react a certain way? How did we get to that place? You have to take your time and really process that. Once you're able to process it, you'll be able to, again, number one, forgive yourself. Number two, pull the lessons out of it. Number three, forgive the other person because you thought about, hey, I had this part to play. This is where I think the other person had a part to play. And then now I no longer feel guilty or bound by the situation. I've now taken my time. And then number six, I can accept the things for the way that they are. When you're able to accept things, that's often a hard pill to swallow for a lot of situations. Being able to accept things for the way they are, that's not to say that and this, like, I guess really is important when you look at relationships. Now, whether they are familiar relationships or romantic relationships, platonic relationships, when you accept things for the way they are, you remove expectation. A lot of issues that I find come up when we sit and we try to hold someone to our own expectations, right? So, say you tell your partner, hey, or you put not you tell them, but you expect certain things of them based off of your experience. Everybody's experiences are very different. And again, like I said in the beginning, they make up who we are, everyone's experience. So my experience is different from yours. And if you try to expect me to operate according to what you understand and know rather than what I tell you or how I tell you I move, then that can become an issue. You have to accept things for the way they are. When people tell you who they are, in the words of Maya Angelou, she said, believe them. Believe people when they tell you who they are. People tell you in various ways who they are. Sometimes you have to question and you have to say, I need a little clarity. Can you explain this to me? So that once the person does clarify, take them at their word. Unless you have, you know, reason to believe, based off of other situations, that this person, constantly tells untruths, that they are not going to be truthful and upfront with you. If they have been truthful and upfront, take them at their word and operate according to what they tell you. Because if they are not truthful, if they are not being who they said, they will not be able to operate in that manner. So if I tell you, hey, I don't believe in gossip. That's one of the terrible, the worst things that you could ever do is gossip about friends and family and, in the workplace and all this kind of stuff. But then I call you and I say, guess what? Guess what happened at work today? Then I'm showing you a difference, right? Because in one instance, I proclaimed that I'm not a gossip, but yet I called you to throw you that bone and wheel you in and try to hook you into a conversation. That is a gossip. When you see something like that, you can say, okay, you're not operating in the same manner in which you spoke and what you said you were, right? And again, sometimes those things require clarification. You may have to say, hey, guess what? I'm having a little bit of an issue with this because on one hand, you said this, you said you operate and you behave like this, but on the other hand, you've shown me this, and I'm a little confused. Can you provide the clarification? Can you help me understand? Are you joking? What's going on? Because I don't know what's going on at this point. Once the person is able to provide clarification, if it is, above board and it is realistic and they are able to communicate and it kind of makes sense, it's rational, I would say, again, take them at their word for it. If it does not, then you have to say, well, you know what, that just does not make sense to me. And based off of what you're saying, I can't really agree with that. And again, when you say, hey, I can't really agree with it, or you say, hey, I agree with it, you are accepting things for the way they are. When we sit and we try to fight, we wear each other down. We, I think, start to lose focus because your focus is off of the positive. You're so focused on being defensive that, you lose sight of what the grand scheme is. So, this was made to be, I think, I just kind of wanted to give you a few things as to what you can do to make peace with your past. As a matter of fact, we have a few more minutes, so I'm going to actually go on. The next one is focus on what you have. When you need to make peace with the past, don't worry about what you're lacking. So sometimes those things that we experience in the past, it may be due to a lack, right? And so you may say, I don't know, like a lot of people I hear, we talk about our past in terms of our parents and, our upbringing or what have you. And we may say, well, I behaved this way because, I don't know, my dad wasn't in the home, so I don't know, I'm just running rampant, running around. I'm very wild because I did not have that structure. You have to focus on what life has for you now and what you can do with what you have now, not so much what the past was, because you don't want to be trapped by the past. That is the worst thing. We are, again, creatures that are made to move. We move forward through time and life. We don't move backwards. So we have to stop turning around to look back. Once we take and learn the lessons from the past, there's really no reason for us to turn around and look back over our shoulder, because we are, again, made to move forward. And we want to focus on the things that are ahead so that we know what's coming up on us. I mean, think about a car, right? We're made to move in one direction with our car as we're driving. We're not supposed to drive backwards, even though some of us do. We're not supposed to drive backwards. We're supposed to drive looking forward so that we can see what we're heading towards, what's coming up next, what's in front of us, not necessarily what's behind us, right? So we have to accept things for what they are and focus on what you have right now. The next thing is be true to yourself. Being true to yourself, I think, is so important. That is like a lesson that one of the sage things that my great grandmother used to say to me, and she used to say it, I know, to my sister, was, to thy own self be true. And that is a phrase from Hamlet, but it's so important, because if you are not true to yourself, again, you become like that ship that sail in the wind. You're just flapping. You have no grounding. You're not certain of who you are. You have to be true and honest with who you are, how you operate, what you want, all those things, so you can adequately communicate that to other people so that they know how to take you. Again, if you tell me one thing and I take you at that and you start doing something else, then I become confused because I'm now seeing a conflict between what you said now, what you said before, and what you're doing now. So you have to be true to yourself, be honest and upfront with yourself first, and then you're also able to be honest and upfront with somebody else. The next thing is don't hold back. Listen, sometimes you need to really process through information. You need to process through a situation. You can't hold back information. You can't hold back your feelings. I think it's so important, especially if you're working through issues with, say, like a family member, right? You have an issue, an art, or what have you. Don't try to sugarcoat a situation. Be raw and real with the situation so that the person can totally understand what is going on. They can say, okay, well, this is actually what you said to me. This is how you feel when you talk to somebody about something. Say, this is how you made me feel. Put it all out on the table. If I hold information back, am I truly giving you the real nitty gritty of the situation? Will you fully understand why I feel a certain way? If I'm very enraged by something, but I give you a sugar coated version when you say to me, well, what's wrong? You don't understand the full gravity and the weight of how I'm feeling. Now, that's not to say you just go off and you start screaming and hollering and all that kind of stuff. You have to basically just be upfront and real and honest so that the people understand exactly what you are saying. The next thing is vent it out. It's the same thing in terms of holding back. Now, vent it out. Sometimes, when people vent during arguments and what have you, it can get kind of crazy, right? Because we just start yelling and carrying on. That's not, what's the word? That is not, I want to say professional, but it's not professional. That is not a good way or a positive way to vent a situation. The positive way of venting a situation, number one, is to be calm, because nobody is listening to the person who's yelling. We hear the loudest person in the room, but sometimes we're not listening to them. We're looking at the antics of what they're doing, but we're not really listening to them. But if I come to you and I say, hey, listen, I see a lot of people on Instagram this evening. Thank you guys so much for joining. I see my nephew and I see my good girlfriend Tina. So if I say, Tina, hey, last week we got into an argument and things got out of control. This is how I felt when you said this. I know I may have made you feel a kind of way when I said this. You're able to vent it and talk about it. Or if I say, well, Tina, based off of what happened, this is how I'm feeling. I can adequately relay that to you without screaming and hollering. That way, Tina can listen to me and say, okay, I can receive what you're telling me. I can't hear it or not hear it. I can't receive it in the way that it needs to be received when you're screaming and hollering. And sometimes when we scream and holler, half the time we just saying anything. We're all over the place. The thoughts become incoherent. We're not focused. We're just letting out the emotion. Now, I'll be perfectly honest. I have those moments, right? I try to not allow myself to get there because I understand what that looks like and how that can come out. And that is not the person that I want to be. So I'm very cautious to keep that side of me, under wraps and really try not to let that out, because I believe there is definitely a way to communicate information without screaming and hollering. And I just don't think that is the most positive way. But again, sometimes you have to vent it out, but it's how you vent it out. You can do that in a calm, cool, collected manner. And sometimes, listen, when things happen, you don't always have to address it right then. I think that is one of our major issues. Sometimes we feel like we have to say things right when they happen. And I'll tell you what, I'm talking to myself just as I'm talking to everybody else. I'm talking to myself because sometimes that is the thing that has been one of my hardest lessons to learn, that you don't always have to address something right in the moment. Sometimes you have to let a situation breathe. That's what my good coworker, my girlfriend that sits next to me at work, she says, you got to let a situation breathe for a minute. Let it breathe. You get yourself together. Sometimes letting it breathe is, a couple of hours. Sometimes it's a day. It might be a week. But by the time you let that situation breathe and you calm down, the other person has calmed down, you can go back to them and say, hey, guess what? Do you mind if we talk about, what happened a week ago? I know I don't want it to seem like I'm just bringing up the past, but I have to let you understand, or I have to try to convey to you how I felt, because I don't want to feel like that. And I know 9 times out of 10, you may not have meant for me to feel the way I felt, but I have to let you know so that you can understand it. And then maybe you will not allow me or do something that would make me feel that type of way in the past. Other people, I appreciate when people come to me and they say, hey, can I talk to you about something? Because in that moment, I think my mind opens up. I am more receptive when you come to me in that type of manner versus you come up to me and you that gets the shutdown, because first of all, I'm thinking like, what's going on here? So the best way to go to someone is to go to them in that calm manner. You said, don't let yourself be a villain. Yes, that is very, very, very smart. Do not allow yourself to be the villain. And you know what? It's so ironic that you say that, because sometimes you can't help the part you will play in someone else's story. Some people, I will tell you, and this is kind of off track, but I thought that was so good that I'm going to have to address that there's a phrase, all the world is a stage and we are just players on it, right? And so if all the world's a stage and we are players on it, that means we're in a play. If you see life as a play, you are a character. You are unable to help the character that someone else makes you in their story. You can only help the character that you are in your own story. And so I think that is so important. I thought about that the other day, which is why I'm talking about it now, because I was like, as much as you may try, everyone is not going to perceive you in the way that you intend for them to. You can try as you may to present yourself in a most positive light to someone. That doesn't mean that they will perceive it, because our perception is often based on our own experiences. If you encounter somebody and you're very just happy and you're like, hey, I want to be your friend. I'm very friendly. Be my friend, be my friend. To some people, they will say, oh, okay, that's a person that wants to be friends. Some other people will say, I don't know about that, because that person they're too eager to be friends. And you will make that assumption based off of your past. You may have encountered somebody where they did that. They were like, be my friend, and you were their friend. And then they turned around and, like we say, I hate to say it, but they stabbed you in the back, or, things didn't go according to as you thought based off of the way that they presented themselves to you. So I think it's so important that we have to remember that, again, we can only control the character we are in our own story. We can't control how other people or the character we are in their stories. And a lot of times the stories are the same, but the character perception is different. That might be another show. But anyway, I'm going to move on because I have 2 more points and I want it to be done in 30 minutes. So let's say, talk to someone. If you can't vent it out, you can't let it go. Oh, I'm sorry. The other thing was to let it go. After you vent it out, you want to let it go, right? You don't want to keep talking about it over and over again. You don't want to keep going back to it after Tina and I talk and we come to a resolution and, we say, okay, this was the part that I played in it and I'm so sorry. Please, I apologize for what I have done to you to cause the art between us. And Tina says, you know what, I apologize as well. We come to that agreement. There's no reason that I'm going to go to somebody else and say, guess what? Do you remember? You won't believe 2 weeks ago, Tina did this to me. There's no reason for me to bring it up. Let it go. Once the situation has passed, you have gotten to a place of resolution with the situation, you should let it go. Because if you cannot let it go, then you are still trapped by the situation, right? At some point, you have to let it go. And I believe when you finally are able to let something go, that is when the true forgiveness has taken place. Sometimes we say, I forgive you, and we still harbor that ill feeling, or if somebody comes to you and they say, please accept my apology. Yeah, okay, I accept your apology. You do it begrudgingly. You have not truly forgiven that person. And so you still walk around with it and you're trapped by that situation, because I guarantee you the number one way that you will understand that you are still trapped by a situation is if that situation is still a trigger for you. So you sit and somebody says, I don't know. Let's say somebody stole my girlfriend, what have you. Somebody stole my boyfriend, whatever the situation is. And they go on and you have it out with that person, right? They say, well, I apologize. I didn't know that you guys were dating. That person never said anything, and you're harboring that ill feeling towards that person. They say, well, I apologize. Please forgive me. And you say, yeah, well, that's fine. I forgive you. But then if somebody else comes up to you and say, girl, I can't believe so-and-so tried to go out with your boyfriend, and you go right back into, and yeah, I can't believe that. You have not forgiven because you have not allowed yourself to be able to let that go. You can't let it go. So that's something you have to know that you have to continue to work with. If those situations still become triggers for you, you have not been able to let it go. Sometimes to be able to let something go, you have to seek outside counsel. You have to talk to somebody else. You're not always able to solve every problem yourself. Sometimes you have to go outside, be it a therapist, be it a pastor for those of us who go to church. It may be a good friend. I think every person should have what I like to call wise counsel. Wise counsel comes in many forms. It's that person that you can trust to give you an honest opinion or an honest view of what they see. They're able to also give you guidance into or through certain situations because they can look at a situation objectively. Your wise counsel is not going to always be your yes person. It's not going to always be the person that will agree with you and say you are right. Your wise counsel, again, is the person that is going to be upfront and tell you the truth. Now, they may not say, oh, yeah, you a liar, or oh, yeah, you wrong. They may listen to your situation and say, you know what, Rashawn, I hear what you're saying, but I think you should look at it like this. Or like I try to do when I talk to my friends is I listen to what they tell me. And sometimes I come back and I say, well, let me ask you, did you think about the situation like this? Because sometimes you need somebody that can share an opposing viewpoint, because sometimes we only see things the way we see them based off of our perception, based off of our experiences and all that sometimes we need somebody else to interject something and say, hey, take a look at it and think of it like this. Evaluate the situation from this standpoint. And what do you see? Are you able to see that person's standpoint? Are you able to see how they might have been feeling while this whole thing is going on? You have to have that opposing viewpoint, because then or not them, but you're able to have that opposing viewpoint to give you a more well-rounded view of what may have taken place. We always see things from our perspective. It's very difficult to see things from somebody else's perspective, right? Unless the perspective is brought to you. So the last thing I would say is you have to love yourself. When you love yourself, you're able to really focus on you and do the things that are necessary for you. When you love yourself, you're able to figure out all these things that I'm trying to think of the best way to say this. I'll say it like this. When you love yourself, you will have gotten to know yourself. Once you know yourself, you can tell other people how you expect to be treated, how to handle and deal with you. So it all goes back to all these things kind of link together, so to speak. And that's why I kind of like this list. I kind of like this topic. And like I said, I presented it on another platform, and I thought um, it was a great thing to talk about because again, a lot of times when I speak to others, but then I'm also talking to myself. So I may be processing emotions and whatnot as I'm speaking, because sometimes we do, speak and preach to ourselves when we have conversation. So just to kind of run through the topics again, just so that you are reminded, I'll say the number one thing, you have to forgive yourself in the situation. Think back and take a lesson. What can you draw from what has just happened? After you think back, say you have to forgive the other person. Forgiveness is not so much for them, it is for you. It's so that you are not trapped by the situation and held in one space. You have to stop feeling guilty. You have to release the guilt, stop holding yourself in that one space, and allow yourself to move on, release that guilt, take your time, process the information, process the situations, think about what is taking place, then accept things for the way they are. Do not try to make it out to be something that it is not. Accept things for the way they are so that you can deal with them in a realistic way. Focus on what you have. Do not think about so much what you don't have. Don't think about your lack. Be grateful for what you have. Focus on what you have. Focus on what's going on right now in the present, and then you can move forward. Like I said earlier, we learned the lesson. We thought about what took place in the past, but after we thought about it, we prepare ourselves to move forward, focusing on what we have. Be true to yourself. Be honest with yourself. Be upfront with yourself about what you want, how you want to be treated, how you want people to perceive you, all those kind of things, and then display those behaviors accordingly. Don't hold back. Sometimes we cannot hold back. When we need to resolve a situation, we have to really be upfront and tell people how we're feeling so that there is no confusion. A lot of times, if we sugarcoat or if we don't give the full story, then the person cannot adequately grasp how we're feeling, and it may still not make sense to them. Sometimes you have to say it over and over again. Tina said, yes, be accountable, whether you're right or wrong. I think that's so important. Someone said to me recently, Tina, they said, hey, listen, you have to acknowledge when you're wrong. You can't just skate over it and keep moving forward when you're wrong. For the other person, sometimes so that they can feel heard, you have to acknowledge that you were wrong. So to say, hey, you know what? I thought about what you said and I think you were right. I was incorrect in that situation. It's not so that the other person feels like, yes, I knew I was right. I told you, it's so that they feel heard. They feel like you have taken the time to internalize what they've told you, and then you're able to move forward. Now, even still, sometimes, like you said, whether you're right or wrong, Tina, guess what? I thought about what you said, and I tried to think about it in a couple of different ways. I thought about it from this standpoint, from that standpoint, and I still don't agree. And sometimes that's when we have to say, how about we just agree to disagree and let's just move forward. We have to always look for that path and, that method of moving forward. Don't allow yourself to be trapped and to stay in one position. Let's see, vent it out and let it go. Vent it out to definitely talk to somebody, talk to the person that you have the art with, kind of let them know real, raw, uncut how you're feeling, and then let it go. Don't hold on to it. Be ready to move forward. Talk to someone if you need to. Talk to a therapist, a friend, your pastor, what have you. A lot of times, for me, my wise counsel is my mother. I call her and I'll say, hey, well, first of all, I'll tell you this is the strangest thing. You hear some parents talk about the links that they have with their kids. This is one of the things I'll say it kind of weirds me out. My mother can always call me when I am not in the best place emotionally. She always knows. So she'll call me and say, hey, what's going on? And even if I say, no, everything's fine, I have to then go back and say, guess what? This is what was going on. This is what I kind of need to talk about, right? And then that way, that's one person that I know will always be upfront and honest with me and say, well, Rashawn, I hear what you're saying, but guess what? That's not, I don't think that that's correct. And she's able to offer me a point of view, a different way of thinking about it. I think I have very wise friends. I talk to my friends about a lot of things. And even when it comes to like relationships and stuff. And I think that because I have wise friends, I feel comfortable with doing that. I don't feel like my friends, well, first of all, I have a very small friend circle, and I feel that those who are in my friend circle, definitely we all have each other's best interests at heart. We definitely try to assist each other when we can. We uplift each other when we can. We hear, when they're going through things. We are sometimes there just for to be a listening ear. We're sometimes there to offer them the counsel that they're seeking. One of the things that I have learned over the years, or I said I have recently learned it, but it's kind of been playing out over the years, is you have to ask people, what are their expectations when you talk to them, right? When a friend calls you up and they say, child, let me tell you about, my husband, let me tell you, what he's doing. And, this isn't right. That isn't right. Da, 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 all that kind of stuff. One of the things that I've learned to kind of ask with certain people is, are you sharing this with me for to be a listening ear? Or are you sharing it with me so that I can offer an opinion? Because that becomes so important, because sometimes people do share things because they need to vent it. They're in that stage where they need to vent it out. They need to let it out. They feel comfortable telling you, but they're not asking for your advice. They just need to get it off their chest. So if they're venting and they just need to get it off their chest, like I'm talking to my good girlfriend Tina, and I'm saying, well, Tina, this is what happened to me. And, this person treated me unfairly, and, I'm just done. I don't want to deal with this anymore. And Tina says, well, you know what? You should go and you should da 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 da. I may not be ready to hear that from Tina. Right. So I like to ask when I deal with certain people. Now I have certain friends that I know they're coming to me so that we can talk about something, that we just have that relationship where we are always talking. Like I'll tell you, my good girlfriend Sharonda, we talk all the time, and we've probably heard the good, bad, and the ugly about each other. And we know that we can talk and say, hey, this is what it needs. This is what you need to do moving forward. This is how you need to think about it. It's always that person that I can go to get the opinion or to get that advice of how should I operate, how should I be moving. But it's important to ask, I think, when you're dealing with some people, when you're not sure, when you don't know whether or not you really have that type of a relationship, you need to ask, say, hey, are you sharing this with me so that I can give you some advice, or are you sharing it with me so that I can just listen? Because I'm more than willing to be a listening ear, but if you're asking for advice, I'm willing to give that as well. Let the person tell you what they're looking for. Like one of my neighbors always says, let me know how you want me to show up. When he first said that to me, I said, what in the world? He said, let me know how you want me to show up as a friend. He wasn't talking to me. We were talking about a situation. And I thought that was so poignant and instrumental, because I said, wow, you are asking for direction from the person that's talking to you so that you can adequately support them in the way that they need, right? So if I'm going through and I just need to vent, I need a listening ear, and you say, well, how do you want me to show up for you? I just need a listening ear. I just need somebody to hear me and let me get this out. That's one thing. But if I say, I need your advice, I need you to tell me what to do, exactly, as my friend, how to show up for me and how I need, or how to best help me to move forward. Last thing, again, is love yourself. And I think at the end of the day, we have to learn, we have to love ourselves. We have to learn ourselves. Sometimes we have to take the time to really get to know who we are. I'll say for me, it took me quite a while to really get to understand the person that I am. I am not a person that, I'll say, follows the norms in a lot of different ways. In my thinking, in how I operate with people, it's not always what you may expect. And so I think you have to know that about yourself. When you know that, then you can share that with other people so that they understand what they may be used to may not be how they can perceive you, if that makes sense. I mean, does that make sense to you guys? If you know yourself, then I can tell you how I operate, how I move. Once I tell you that, you know how to take the things that I do, how to take what I'm putting out. If don't know myself, I can't tell you. You're just going to take me based off of your experience and your perception. And sometimes that may be incorrect, and sometimes that may cause issue or art. So I think it's so important that you learn to love yourself. Once you know yourself, the more you know yourself, the more you'll be able to love yourself and really think about what is best for you, what you want. And that is so important also, to have that in mind. What do you really want? What do you want out of life? What do you want in relationships, so that you can adequately share that with the person that you are either in relationship with or you're in friendship with. It's just such an important thing to know and to love yourself. So I think we have actually, I kind of had an idea to try to hold this to 30 minutes, but I think, I love to talk so much, and I love to share, and I love to read the comments. And I want to thank everyone who joined us on Instagram. I saw a lot of people roll by. Like I said, I see uh, two of my clients on there. I see my nephew. I see one of my old schoolmates from way back in the day. So, Thomas, I'm going to tell everybody, well, I'm not going to tell them how old you are, but we'll just say way back in the day. Shauna, hey, Shauna. Shauna's one of my good friends. We had jury duty together some years ago. And it's great when you have those relationships that you can still continue to keep up and check in on each other's lives and whatnot. I see some of my stylist friends, Shanae and Sean. I see an old coworker, Jonathan. I see another coworker and friend and sister, Electra. Tina, I've said her name so many times tonight, but Tina is one of my good friends that she was actually, we went to beauty school at the same time. She was finishing as I was starting. She was an instructor, a fabulous person, fabulous stylist. G Vibes, thank you. Mr. Brand New, thank you for popping on. Barbara Inc., Sip and Sew, all these great people. Thank you so much. My good sister Joyce has tapped in for the evening. The Makeup One, everybody, Jazz, everybody that popped in this evening. Thank you so much for even just popping in for just a moment, if you could. I would ask that before we go, that you set your notification if you can for your Instagram live so that definitely when I go live, you'll be aware. Set your notification on Facebook. This is going to YouTube, I believe also. So subscribe, all that kind of stuff, because really I want to create a platform where we can talk and we can share, and hopefully we can impart some good things in each other's lives. Some days, it won't be as heavy as this. It may not, somebody may say, well, Tal, this topic was a little dry. Some topics are not always going to be explosive because they're really meant to aid and to help somebody. And like I said, for me, a lot of times I come up with topics and things to talk about based off of what I may be going through. And so a lot of times I remember the first time I presented this, I got very emotional because I was going through something, and everything that I was talking about as I was reading through the topics, it was really talking to me, and I was internalizing as I was talking. I had to take a minute and stop and really just kind of take a breath, because I was like, oh my goodness, I did not know this was going to affect me in this kind of way. But that is how I think when we share and we talk to each other, we can really impart some great things in each other's lives, but we have to be willing to talk and share. So I hope that, you guys join us again. Like I said, this is Sheer Chat After Dark. Set your notification, because I like to say I'm going to come on Mondays. 9 times out of 10 I will, but then I may come on in some other day of the week as well, just because I have something interesting or salacious to talk about. So thank you so much for joining us again for this episode of Sheer Chat After Dark. This was making peace with your past so that your past does not show up in your future. I hope you took note of the things that we talked about, and you definitely internalize them, and you utilize them as you move forward through various situations in your life. Like I said, be it relationships, be it romantic relationships, platonic relationships, work relationships. I think all of this is very important, and these are great steps and things to keep in mind as you do that. So thank you again for joining us, and I hope you join me again on another evening. Have a great evening. Thanks so much.